Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a really provocative piece of work, a kind of techno-spiritual manifesto. And it imagines these futures where technology and our own consciousness don't just, interact, they actually merge. We're not talking about faster phones or bigger screens here. We're talking about redesigning the very feeling of being human. So let's just jump right in with a wild question. What if your anxiety or your creativity or even your empathy, what if you could tune those things like a radio station? You could dial up your focus for a big project or just dial down the stress before a presentation. That's the core idea we're going to unpack. And this whole concept has a name, the divine interface. You can think of it as like the ultimate operating system for your mind. A whole set of technologies that can directly plug into and even intentionally change your inner world. It's really the key that unlocks all of the wild futures we're about to explore. Okay, so let's get into it. And we're going to start at the most personal level possible. You. How would something like a divine interface first start to change your own individual experience of the world? Well, the first future this manifesto paints is one where our economy totally changes. We'd still trade goods, sure, but the hot new market? Curated states of consciousness. An entire economy built on how you want to feel and think. So forget subscribing to Netflix. Imagine subscribing to an experience stream that gives you a monthly boost of, say, emotional resilience. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. The unexpected twist? A startup starts offering the profit state. It lets you tap into the actual neurochemical patterns of historical visionaries. You could literally experience the creative flow of the poet Rumi or the logical genius of Ada Lovelace. You wouldn't just be reading about them, you'd be feeling how they thought. And this idea of curated consciousness could go even further, completely transforming something as ancient as the idea of a pilgrimage. I mean, forget just visiting a sacred place. What if you could experience the original vision that made it sacred to begin with? You could travel to these special neurohubs to have a scientifically reconstructed mystical vision. And the manifesto gives this incredible example, the burning bush protocol. It would become this global phenomenon, right? Using archaeology, neuroscience, weather data, it would recreate the biblical event not as some private little dream, but as a shared, synchronized vision for thousands of people at once. That's a 21st century pilgrimage. So we've seen how this could change us as individuals, but what happens when you take this tech and scale it up to an entire community? How do you retune a whole city? Well, the first idea is that our buildings, they wouldn't just be for our bodies anymore. They'd be for our minds. Architecture would become a tool to actually compose a mental state for the people inside and around it. This could lead to something like Neuro-Symphony Nodes. These towers that emit subtle signals to lower anxiety in a public park, or maybe sharpen focus in a financial district. And this creates this totally new kind of fascinating social dynamic. Neighborhoods could actually start competing for the title of most enlightened quarter. You might choose to move to a new area not for the schools, but because it's famous for its atmosphere of creative flow. Okay, now, if citywide signal towers feel a little creepy or invasive, the manifesto suggests another path, a much gentler, more organic approach using nature itself to upgrade the urban atmosphere. Just imagine this. Rooftop gardens filled with resonance plants. These are plants that are genetically tuned to release these mild neuroactive compounds through their smell or even through subtle patterns of light. The very air in the city becomes a tool for well-being. And the cultural side of this is just wonderful. Districts could host these seasonal mental festivals, like a harvest flow in the fall or a winter wonder trance, all powered by what's blooming on the city's rooftops.
Okay, so we've gone from the self to the city, and the final logical step is the entire planet. What are the global implications when you can start to connect the minds of an entire species? What does that even look like?
At this massive scale, two really powerful paths emerge for how we could tackle our biggest challenges. On one hand, you have collective lucidity. This is all about solving problems with mass intellect.
Think of it like an intellectual flash mob, where thousands of minds sync up to solve a problem in real time. But then there's this other path, a compassion infrastructure. And here, the answer isn't more brain power, it's more heart. It's about using this tech to create mass empathy days that temporarily dissolve our biases and our tribal thinking.
And the potential outcomes? They're just staggering. With collective lucidity, you could have a global problem-solving hour that leads to genuine breakthroughs on things like fusion energy or climate change. And with the compassion infrastructure, international peace treaties that usually take decades of fighting could be signed in a matter of days just by having world leaders synchronize in empathy mode. Two totally different tools for redesigning our collective future. Now, I know, this all sounds incredibly abstract, right? So to bring it all back down to earth, the manifesto ends with this short, powerful story. It's meant to ground these huge ideas in a real human experience. So the scene is set in the year 2047. There's this festival of harmony. And at the festival, people can step inside these things called resonant capsules. And these capsules connect them to a global network that can translate the patterns of nature directly into human thought. And we meet Lucia. She's a young engineer, and she steps into one of these capsules with a very specific, practical goal. She needs a breakthrough on this lunar project she's been stuck on. She's not looking for some spiritual awakening. She's just trying to solve an engineering problem. And here, this is where it all clicks into place. Lucia steps out of the capsule and she's got it. The logistical solution, the mechanics, it's all crystal clear in her head. But she comes away with something else too, this profound, overwhelming feeling of having been in the presence of something vast and sacred, something that ancient cultures might have just called God. The practical and the spiritual, they became the same thing. So after hearing all of that, the obvious question pops up, right? Is this just a complete fantasy? Is this pure science fiction? Well, the manifesto argues no, not at all. It suggests that these futures are actually the logical endpoint of three big trends that are already happening right now. Number one, we're getting shockingly good at altering brain chemistry with precision drugs. Two, we are finally starting to map and measure what consciousness actually looks like with tools like fMRI scans. And three, our entire culture is obsessed with peak performance and human optimization. It argues that these three roads, they're all converging on the same destination. And that brings us to the manifesto's final powerful statement. It says, the point of a divine interface isn't to escape reality. It's the tool that will finally allow us to redesign reality from the inside out. And that, of course, leaves us with the final and maybe the most important question of all. If or when we develop these kinds of tools, when we gain the power to consciously shape our own reality, what kind of reality are we going to choose to build?